When I left China, my apartment was handed to my replacement, and she subsequently found that there were listening devices, not only in my apartment, but also in my office, which was in a separate building nearby. Whether they were in operation or not, we don't know. But it does sort of serve to remind you that this is an authoritarian state that still considers foreign journalists with some suspicion. My name is David Pierson. I'm a reporter for the LA Times. So I arrived in China in 2009. It was right during the financial crisis, and I knew this was going to be a defining moment for China and its place in the world. I was leaving a country that was like in flames and going to a country that was just they had so much liquidity in their state banks because of the structure. They were taking money from ordinary people and giving them no interest rates. And so here they were with a flood of cash. They're worried about the economy slowing down, so the banks just opened the floodgates for money. And that would tell the story. I mean, that would be the story, is what happens to all that money. And so infrastructure building was, like we talk about it here in America, the Chinese government was pouring, billions of dollars into infrastructure to keep the economy humming and keeping employment rate high. So of course that meant, a lot of money was pouring into things that were just not necessary, bridges to nowhere, if you will. One of the fastest growing sectors in China was the aviation one. I found this one airport in a central province, high on a mountain sort of plateau, where the winds would howl. The staff there were complaining about how frightening it was because they were so lonely up there. And sure enough, there was one flight that came in during a week, and so I flew in there for that one flight. They switched on the lights for our arrival in this gleaming multi-million-dollar airport. A very professional, courteous staff, went through, spent a night in this town, and took the flight the next day, and that was it. And the staff, they told us, yeah, we would just hang out for the rest of the days. We'd play cards, we'd have hot pot. It was a good time. Telling the ghost town story, it's on face value, it's easy to do because it looks very wasteful. But the argument for it is that China's economy will grow into it. The problem is sometimes you don't see the strategic thinking and the underlying reasons for some of these things. For example, this airport, it wasn't so clear why it was necessary over there. On the flip side, there was a lot of criticism about the high-speed rail, and I think we've already been proven wrong by how popular some of those rail networks have already become. The problem in China, of course, is that buildings don't tend to have a long shelf life. I remember being shocked that they were knocking down things that were only like a decade old. It just seemed wasteful. It seemed like things were being done just for the GDP numbers often. The one thing that everyone kept harping on was about how China had to become more of a consumer. So I wanted to sort of explore how easy that would be. And I found all sorts of barriers to that. One of the things that always perplexed me was why does a country that makes everything sell the same things to their own people at a premium? Like I found like a pair of Nikes just made in southern China would be 30% more expensive in China than they would be in the United States, or a TV that was made somewhere in China would be 30% more expensive. And it turns out it's simply because there just is no infrastructure for Chinese people to be consumers. And so it's cheaper to ship something from southern China to a port in Western America than it is to truck it up to Beijing or Shanghai. I just found that just so ironic. When I moved to China, we had an empty apartment and we needed furniture, and so we made trips to IKEA when we were out there because it's affordable, and it was stunning to see how crowded it was over there, but how empty it was in the cashier line. And I saw people lying under the covers in the bed with their children. I saw people on dates. People bringing their cameras and taking pictures as if they were in a park. And essentially, IKEA was being used in Beijing as a public space because It's one of these rare places where they let you just hang out. Otherwise, they kick you out. I was talking to people there. They said, we like the air conditioning. We like the food. We like the cheap soft serve ice cream. But they weren't buying anything. You know, this was a consumer class that was still trying to kind of learn how to walk, if you will. And I think the reason why IKEA ultimately thrived or learned to succeed in China is because they understood that there would be this period where they would be introducing a lifestyle change, right, to Chinese consumers. And they stuck through the hard times. And eventually, they were sold on this lifestyle. Whereas, you know, everything else, maybe like a Best Buy, if you're selling electronics, everyone just buys that online now. You get it delivered by a courier. Whereas IKEA offers an experience that you go there and you pretend you live in this floor plan. And it was just so novel, I think, to Chinese people that it eventually took hold. A couple months after I arrived in China, we had just heard about a riot breaking out in the capital of Western Xinjiang province. Predominantly, you know, well, it had been a predominantly Muslim region of China. And it turned out to be a very violent, one of the deadliest incident in China since the Tiananmen massacre. And we flew out there as quickly as possible. And what I learned from that experience is that an authoritarian government, they have so much control over the people. It also means that the people have immense expectations for the government to solve their problems. And they were demanding that the government go into the Uyghur communities and exact revenge, and which the government clearly did not want to do. That was not an option. And so I saw a sort of hapless, middle-level communist official stand on top of an armored personnel carrier with a bullhorn, screaming at hundreds of, you know, just rabidly angry Han Chinese carrying 2x4s and sticks and baseball bats, calling for blood, just begging them to calm down and turn away. And I just, I couldn't believe how fragile things were on the ground.